Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark. Astral Point didn't make the map, and maybe that was on purpose. A town smothered in permanent October gloom, where the sun forgot to rise properly and shadows had long memories. It was old, rotten old, the kind of place where stories whispered in the cracks of the cobblestone streets and ghosts were more punctual than the buses. Witch trials had been the town's claim to fame, if you called murder fame, and every brick of the place seemed to remember the screaming. But for Deja, Coven, and Equinox, it was just home, a weird, fog-choked, vintage-filtered kind of home. The trio had mastered the art of surviving high school in the creepiest town this side of Salem, equal parts sarcasm, arcade nights, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. So remind me why we're not a punk band named Doom Roast? Coven asked, slouched in their usual cracked vinyl booth at Moonbrew Cafe, stirring his coffee with a cinnamon stick like he was performing a spell. We've got the angst, we've got the caffeine addiction. All we need is matching leather jackets and emotional trauma. We have matching trauma, Deja muttered, deadpan, eyes flicking toward the window. Outside, the fog was crawling down the hill like it had teeth. Speak for yourself, Equinox smirked. I'm perfectly adjusted. I only talk to ghosts on Tuesdays now. The bell above the cafe door jingled like it was afraid of being loud. Emma Jean walked in, blonde, bubblegum bright, with a smile so sharp it almost sliced the air. Pink cardigan, white skirt, eyes too blue, too wide, too much, like she was drawn in pastel by someone who'd never met a real girl before. She looked like a cupcake someone left in a graveyard, sweet, but rotting around the edges, and just like that, the screaming started. Not out loud, not yet. But inside Deja's ears, a high-pitched hum, like something ancient, like something forgotten had just remembered her. The road curved like a question mark, coiling through trees that looked dead but never dropped their leaves. The further up they drove, the worse the radio static got. Even the pop station, pure chaos fuzz now, felt like it was trying to warn them in a language nobody spoke anymore. Is it weird that the fog gets thicker the closer we get to her place? Coven asked, peering through the windshield. Like straight-up Silent Hill vibes right now. Only weird if the house starts bleeding or the mailbox tries to talk to us, Equinox offered, chewing on a red licorice like it was a cigar. Which, knowing our luck, fully possible. Deja sat in the back seat, dead silent. She hadn't told the guys about the voice, the soft whisper she heard the moment Emma Jean stepped into the cafe yesterday. It hadn't been words exactly, more like sounds that wanted to become words. She'd woken up last night to that whisper in her ear and the smell of wax. The car rattled up the final hill and lurched to a stop in front of it. The archaic manor. No one called it that out loud, of course. But that's what it was. It looked like it had been stitched into the hilltop, half alive, half abandoned, its Victorian spires curled upward like claws. The paint peeled in long gray strips like shedding skin. Gargoyles crouched on the eaves, their mouths half open as if about to scream. The windows were too dark, not like nobody's home, dark, wrong dark, the kind of dark that watched back. Is it just me, Coven asked, or does this place smell like antique evil? Nope, that's just your breath, Equinox grinned, slamming the car door. Let's go meet Wednesday Addams Barbie. The air bit colder up here, the kind of cold that settled under your skin and stayed. Emma Jean answered the door almost too fast, like she'd been waiting. "Hi, friends," she chirped, voice sugar-coated and strangely loud, like she wasn't used to human volume yet. Come in, come in. I told Mother I made friends, and she's so happy." Her eyes locked on Deja for half a second too long, like she recognized something, or was trying to. The inside of the manor was worse. Dust floated in the air like ash. The wallpaper peeled in jagged shapes that looked like screaming faces. Every clock ticked slightly out of sync. Dozens of candles flickered, even though it was daylight, and yet the house was dark, too dark. "Your place is nice?" Coven offered, voice rising like a question. Emma clasped her hands like a proud museum tour guide. "It's very old, built in 1813. They say it was the town judge's home. He oversaw all the trials." "You mean which trials?" Deja asked before she could stop herself. Emma Jean giggled. "They all died horribly. Burned, hanged, drowned in the river behind the property. Can you believe that? Anyway, do you guys want to see my room?" The three exchanged silent glances. Equinox muttered under his breath, "You think if we say no, she adds us to her doll collection?" Deja's skin prickled. She followed anyway. Emma's room was pristine. White lace curtains, a collection of porcelain dolls lined up along the wall, a vanity with an antique mirror, the kind with flaking silver and a warped reflection. The mirror flickered for a second. No one mentioned it. A door at the end of the hallway caught Deja's eye. It looked newer than the rest. The wood was dark, clean, unaged. There was a symbol carved into it, like a wheel made of bone-thin branches. "That's the attic," Emma Jean said sweetly, appearing beside her like she'd teleported. Her voice was softer now. "Mother says it's forbidden, says it's where bad things were locked away, things that used to speak." That word again. Speak, speak, speak. Deja heard it echo in her head, whispery and bone-thin. They left not long after, saying something about homework. Emma didn't protest, just waved with that too wide smile and said, "Tell your friends I'll see them soon." "We are your friends," Coven muttered with an awkward laugh. Emma blinked slowly, tilted her head. "Oh, I know." The drive back down the hill was silent. Even Equinox didn't joke. It wasn't until they were halfway home that Coven said, "Her shadow didn't move when she did. Did you guys notice that?" Deja swallowed hard. No one responded, because they had. Deja didn't sleep, not because she wasn't tired, but because something kept scratching at her bedroom window. And she lived on the second floor. She lay there under the covers, fists clenched, staring at the ceiling like it might split open. Every once in a while, the whisper came back, that strange, too soft hum of syllables that hadn't yet figured out how to be words. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt like something trying to remember her name. School felt off, worse than usual, which was saying something in Astral Point. The halls smelled faintly of melted wax and rotting roses, and even though the air was cold, everyone seemed to be sweating. Emma Jean wasn't in homeroom or second period. But when Deja turned the corner near the science lab, there she was, standing in front of her locker, not moving, just staring, eyes wide, mouth curled in that pink lipsticked smile, hands hanging stiff at her sides, like she'd forgotten how to be human. Coven bumped into Deja's shoulder hard enough to snap her out of it. "Jesus, don't freeze up like that. I thought you were glitching." Look, she whispered, nodding toward Emma. Coven glanced, blinked, then blinked again. Why is she standing like a haunted Build-A-Bear? Then, without warning, Emma's head snapped toward them, not turned, snapped, too fast, too hard. Bones don't bend that way. She smiled wider and waved. Later that day, a rumor went around school like wildfire. Someone found a dead bird in Emma's locker. No blood, just feathers, and the beak missing. She said she found it like that, Equinox said as they regrouped in the back of the arcade that night. But get this, her voice totally different. Not like lower, not tired, just off, like she was trying too hard to sound like herself. Coven shivered, half buried in a beanbag chair. She give you that Stepford look again? Worse, Equinox said. She mimicked me. Deja straightened. What? She repeated my sentence, word for word, same tone, same timing, and then she just smiled like it was funny. They all went quiet. The whirring buzz of the arcade machines made the silence even worse. Deja's hand slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She uncrumpled it and spread it on the table. Coven leaned forward. Wait, is that from her notebook? She dropped it in chem today, Deja said. Didn't even notice. Look. The paper was filled with circles, not drawn, scratched, repeated over and over until the ink bled through, hundreds of them, each one with X's through the middle. But in the center was something else, a stick figure of a girl, no face, strings attached to her limbs, and above her head a word written over and over in different shapes, sizes, slants, until it barely looked like a word anymore. O-B-E-Y. That night, Deja stood in front of her mirror, still dressed, hoodie clinging to her like a second skin. Her face looked wrong, pale and drawn, like the light was avoiding her eyes. She heard it again, the whisper. This time it said her name. D-E-J-A. Software measured, almost gentle, like someone was behind the glass. She backed away. The next morning, Equinox didn't show up at school. His mom said he woke up screaming, couldn't stop. His eyes were rolled back. He kept whispering porcelain between sobs. Coven and Deja met in the back lot behind school, both visibly shaken. Fog clung to their clothes like static. The bell tower above them chimed 13 times. It's time, Coven said. We go back up to the manor. Tonight. Agreed, Deja said, voice shaking, but we don't tell anyone. Coven tilted his head. Not even Equinox? Deja looked up toward the hill. The fog pulsed like a heartbeat. No, she said, especially not him. They didn't tell anyone they were going. They didn't have to. The hill knew. The fog was waiting at the bottom of the driveway, coiled like a sleeping serpent, thick enough to blur the street behind them. Even the moon looked afraid, half shielded behind clouds that didn't seem to move. Coven cut the headlights as they coasted toward the manor. Why does this feel like a trap? He whispered, clutching the steering wheel like it might bite him. Deja didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the windows. The house looked different. It was taller, narrower, like it had stretched while no one was watching. The gargoyles had moved. They didn't knock. Emma Jean didn't answer. The front door was already open, just a few inches, enough to suggest someone wanted them to come in. Inside, the air was thicker. It pressed against their lungs. Breathing felt like sucking cotton through a straw. Every floorboard groaned like it didn't want to be stepped on. Candles lined the hall again, flickering blue. Is this a seance or an early 2000 goth music video? Coven tried to joke, but it came out thin. Deja pointed to the grandfather clock near the stairs. 9:42 p.m. The second hand was stuck, shuddering back and forth, like it couldn't decide whether to tick forward or reverse. Okay, that's normal, Coven muttered. They passed the hallway with the attic door. It was glowing. The carvings pulsed faintly with pale light, like veins beneath skin. That door wasn't glowing before, Deja whispered. It wasn't doing anything before, Coven said. Emma's room looked untouched, dolls in perfect alignment, bed made, curtains drawn, but this time the vanity mirror was cracked, inward, as if someone from the inside had punched through. Deja walked toward it. Her reflection shimmered like heat over asphalt. Coven? What? She pointed. I'm not blinking. Coven's eyes widened. She turned and ran. They stumbled into a room they hadn't seen before, not because it wasn't there, because it wasn't supposed to be there. Wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing murals beneath, witches burning, eyes painted over with red. The floor was covered in dust, but their footprints never formed, and in the middle of the room stood a table, on it a dollhouse. An exact replica of the manor, complete down to the fog curling outside its miniature door. Inside the tiny rooms were dolls, 3 of them, dressed like Deja, Coven, Equinox, each one strung up by invisible threads. Coven leaned forward. Tell me this is some kind of messed up art project. Deja reached out and touched the little version of herself. The doll blinked. Suddenly, the house groaned, not a creak, a groan, like it was alive and angry. The mirror behind them shattered without warning. Candles blew out. In the pitch black, something scratched against the walls. Deja grabbed Coven's hand. We're leaving, now. They bolted, down the hall, past the glowing attic door, which now breathed. The front door was closed. Coven yanked it. It didn't budge. Deja looked back. Emma stood at the top of the stairs, smiling, not saying a word, but in her hand was a needle, thin, sharp, glittering like silver in the dark. Attached to it was a thread. It trailed down the stairs, straight to Deja's ankle. They got out, somehow. The next thing Deja remembered was collapsing on her front porch, gasping for air. The thread on her ankle burnt into the skin like a brand. Coven's nose was bleeding. Neither of them spoke. The stars above looked wrong, like they were watching. They didn't go to school the next day. Coven claimed food poisoning. Deja just disappeared. Her phone was off. Her house was dark. Her mom out of town for the week. Perfect timing for the world to crack open. It was raining, not a soft drizzle, but that kind of sideways, angry rain that feels like punishment. Coven found her at the library, 3rd floor, archives room, the one nobody used, the one that still smelled like mildew and dust-coated secrets. Deja didn't look up when he walked in. She was surrounded by old newspapers, books with cracked spines, and one massive leather journal bound with twine. Kinda dramatic, don't you think? He said softly, trying to keep it light, hiding in a crypt with a spell book. Deja's voice was hoarse. I found her name. Coven's sarcasm vanished. She slid the journal toward him. Yellowed pages, handwritten ink, strange symbols in the margins, one word at the top of the open page. Archaic. A name? He asked. A sentence, she whispered. It's not just a name, it's a title, a rank. The witches of Astral Point had a hierarchy, and the archaic was the most feared. She wasn't just a witch, she was their memory, the one who kept the past alive, the one who never died. Coven sat beside her. The pages told the rest. Archaic wasn't hanged like the others. They tried, but the rope turned to ash. They buried her in the cemetery under a willow tree, nails in her tongue, coins over her eyes. 3 days later, she was seen again, smiling. She didn't bleed, didn't blink, didn't age. They sat in silence, rain hammering the window. She doesn't look the same, Coven said. That woman, Emma Jean's mom, she's wearing someone else's skin, Deja finished. It's a trick, glamour maybe, or worse. Coven exhaled. So what's Emma then? Deja flipped another page. There was a drawing, a human figure, limbs jointed like a puppet, thread through the arms, legs, spine, a hollow where the heart should be. To carry the curse, one must craft a vessel, the page read. A child not born but bound. She will smile, she will bleed wax, she will obey. Deja's voice cracked. Emma Jean isn't real. They went to Equinox's house next. He looked wrecked, dark circles, hollow eyes. He didn't speak until they were all in the basement, lights low, TV off. Then he said very quietly, "She was in my room." They froze. "Last night," he continued, "I woke up and she was sitting in the corner, just sitting, in the dark, smiling. I thought I was dreaming, but when I looked at my hand this morning—" He held it up. Burned into his palm was the faint imprint of a thread, like it had been wrapped around his fingers all night. "She said I was her favorite," he whispered. That night, the wallpaper in Deja's room began to peel. Not from moisture, it peeled in a pattern, a spiral, moving outward, slow but constant. Behind it was writing, not in English, older, sharper, like claw marks that learned the alphabet. The air smelled like wax and rot. The spiral glowed faintly in the dark, and somewhere outside her window, Emma Jean was humming. Down the street at the foot of the hill, Archaic stood in her garden. She didn't move, didn't breathe, but her mouth opened, and out spilled black moths. They flew upward, disappearing into the fog, toward the homes of children who had forgotten their history. Her eyes glowed like candle wicks, and in the silence she whispered to the night, "It begins again." The attic door was open. No wind, no creaking, just open, like it had never been locked, like it had simply been waiting. The three of them stood at the top of the hill, staring at the glowing doorway in the manor's second-story window. The house looked alive now, veins of light pulsing beneath the walls, breathing in sync with the fog. "She's not in control anymore," Deja whispered. "What do you mean?" Equinox asked, eyes flicking between the house and the woods behind them like something was watching from both. "I mean, she's trying to fight it, but she's losing." Inside, the manor was even worse. It smelled like old honey and hot metal. Candles lined the walls in crooked rows. The dolls from Emma's room were no longer sitting. They stood facing the walls. The time on every clock read the same 3:33 a.m. Coven reached for Deja's hand. She squeezed back so hard it hurt. They climbed the stairs. The door to Emma's room was ajar. Soft humming came from within, the same three-note lullaby they'd heard outside their windows, over and over and over. Coven pushed it open. Emma Jean stood in front of the mirror, smiling. But her reflection wasn't. The girl in the mirror had no face, just wax, melted, cracked, string webbing across her limbs like veins. "Emma," Deja whispered. Emma didn't turn. Her voice came low and soft, like someone else was speaking through her throat. "She's inside my head, pulling my thoughts, making them sharp, making them hers." She finally looked at them. Her eyes flickered, literally, a shutter click glitch in the air. Her mouth twitched into a jagged smile. I don't want to be good anymore. Then she screamed. It wasn't her voice, it was a dozen voices, all layered, all crying, all burning. The walls groaned, the dolls turned to face the room, their eyes opened. The thread in Emma's hand whipped forward, alive, and wrapped around Equinox's wrist. He gasped, dropping to one knee, his skin sizzling like it had touched acid. Deja lunged forward, grabbing Emma's arm. I know you're in there. The room blurred, like reality hiccuped. Emma froze. Something in her eyes softened. Her hand trembled. The thread uncoiled. I can't stop her, she whispered. She made me from pieces. I'm not anything. I'm not real. You're more real than she is, Coven said. You feel she doesn't. I feel pain, Emma whispered. I feel fire. I feel all the deaths, all of them, and she won't let me forget. The attic door creaked open behind them. Black light spilled down the hallway, and a voice, not human, called out. Bring them to me. They ran, but Emma didn't follow. She stood in the doorway of her room, the strings still dangling from her fingers, eyes wide with terror. Next time, she whispered, you won't get away. Back at Deja's house, they sat in her room, trembling, barely speaking. Equinox's wrist was raw and red. The shape of thread burned into his skin. Coven was shaking. Deja stared out the window. The spiral on her wallpaper had grown. It now covered the entire wall. In the center was a phrase written in wax. The vessel is cracking. Down the hill, in the heart of the woods, Archaic opened a book made of skin. She dipped her finger in blood and whispered something so old it made the ground split slightly beneath her. The candle beside her flared. A voice whispered back. Soon, Mother. The sky over Astral Point turned the color of a fresh bruise. People noticed. They just didn't say anything, because deep down they remembered the witch trials, the screams, the rope that turned to ash, the woman who wouldn't burn. Now the fog was back, thicker, alive, curling through keyholes, across mirrors, under beds, and the firelight, it was coming from the manor on the hill. Equinox found the symbol first. It was etched into the street just outside his house, a perfect circle of twigs and salt. Inside, a name written over and over in blood. Emma. Deja found her bed surrounded by dolls, not hers. Their heads had been turned backwards, all of them humming the same three-note melody in low, broken voices. Coven's bathroom mirror shattered the moment he touched it. His reflection screamed back at him, mouth open, eyes black, until the glass exploded. None of them slept. Not anymore. The three met in the abandoned greenhouse behind the cemetery. It had once belonged to Astral Point's founder, who also happened to be the judge who condemned the witches. Now vines choked the beams, and broken statues lined the walls like guardians of a forgotten curse. Tonight, Deja whispered, laying out the page from the witch's journal. She's going to finish the ritual. How? Coven asked. Deja circled the drawing of the doll. She's not using Emma to destroy us. She's using us to destroy Emma. She wants her vessel to split, to make room for something else. Equinox paled. Like what? Deja didn't answer because she knew Archaic wanted a body, and Emma Jean's cracking soul was the doorway. That night, the town square was empty, but every candle in every window flickered, every streetlight buzzed, and from the woods came chanting, low, rhythmic, wrong. In the attic of the manor, Emma Jean stood in the middle of a chalk-drawn circle, arms out, strings sewn through her wrists and ankles, jaw trembling. Archaic hovered just behind her, hands coated in wax, eyes black with flame. "You were my masterpiece," she hissed, voice like boiling sap. "But you began to feel, and now we must fix that." Deja kicked the manor door open. The trio moved fast, Coven with salt in his hands, Equinox holding the broken mirror they'd found behind Emma's locker, and Deja carrying the journal. The house was burning from the inside out, not with flame, with memory. Screams echoed through the walls, chanting from 100 years ago. Visions of witches with sewn mouths and eyes burned shut. Paintings wept blood. Dolls whispered names they weren't supposed to know. The attic door opened before they touched it. Emma's head snapped toward them. Her mouth smiled, but her eyes screamed. Strings danced in the air, reaching for them. Deja shoved the mirror forward. "Look at yourself." The reflection caught Emma mid-lurch. She froze and saw. Her eyes flickered, glitched, then began to bleed wax. "I don't want to be a weapon," she cried. "I didn't ask to be born." From behind her, Archaic screamed, a sound like everything dying at once. She lunged, but Coven threw the salt. Equinox smashed the mirror, and Deja read the final passage aloud from the journal in the language of the condemned. The manor howled, strings snapped, candles exploded, 100 voices cried out, and the attic collapsed. When the sun rose, the manor was gone. In its place, ashes, and a single candle still burning. They found Emma lying in the rubble, alive, shivering, eyes blank. But when Deja reached out, Emma grabbed her wrist. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," she whispered, "but I did." Deja knelt beside her. "You're free now." Emma blinked. No one in Astral Point is ever free. A week later, the spiral returned. This time it grew on Deja's back, under her skin. Emma vanished. Her mother's name was never found in the town's records, and late at night, if you listen hard enough near the burned hilltop, you'll hear a girl humming 3 soft notes, a lullaby for the next vessel. Because this wasn't the end. It was only ever the beginning.